Good afternoon, everyone. We're here continuing with our discussion of Light Bearer, and we're up to the year of 1997. We're doing these on a weekly basis. Most of you watch them not in real time, but for those of you who do, I have to tell you that for the next several months, the regularity is not going to be there. In a few days, I'm going to go on retreat for the month of August 2022. I'll still be on email and text, and I may come out for one or two things in the course of the month, but mostly I'm on retreat, no broadcasts of any kind, because starting for the rest of the year, I'm going to be doing for a couple of months, I'm also going to be on the road. So I'll come back and resume classes for most of September. And then I'm not sure. We won't quite be able to finish the book, but I might have to let it rest for a few months while I'm on the road and then see where it comes after that. I'll be traveling the East Coast of America to Texas and then to Europe, traveling through Italy, Germany, Holland, and France, and then on to the UK. It's not going to be a big, it's not going to be a big, what you say, it's not going to be big venues. But I'll be visiting all of our Ananda devotees, devotee groups in those areas, and you'll be able to go on my website or my Instagram account, or just write directly to me, and I can let you know how to find out where I'll be and what I'm going to be doing. I know everything is global now, so it's anything is for everyone, and in the following year, I undoubtedly will get to India, and a friend is also talking about some other interesting trips, Australia, New Zealand, perhaps going back to Singapore, perhaps to South Africa. So this, for me, is like a resumption of responsibility Swamiji gave me before COVID and before I wrote Light Bearer, that have all been on hiatus for a little while. So now we're going to start over again. So now let's go into our class for today. Let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramahansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dear friends, Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to feel your living presence, walking with us, guiding us, inspiring us, helping us always to remember that this life has a divine purpose. Help us to keep our focus ever on the spiritual light within, that everything we do enhance that light, deepen that light, shares that light, and brings us ever closer to thee. Om. Peace. Amen. Okay, my friends, there is every so often I discover anomalies with dates, and I feel badly because I know that future generations are going to have to sort this out. So I'm going to try to make it work. I have a collection, an archive collection of photographs, which I always tell you are somewhat motley. And the photographs that I had spoke of Swami's house in Assisi being built in 1996. I also got that word from people who live in Assisi. Turns out, of course, his house was built in 1997, which really makes very little difference until somebody later is going to come and find the contradiction. So I'm hoping to avoid that difficulty and other small mistakes that are there, but surprisingly few considering how many details there are to keep clear. 1997 in the book, Light Bearer, is one of the shortest chapters in the book because, as I wrote in the introduction and have explained to you, this is a firsthand account of experiences with Swami, mostly experiences that I myself had with him, or reports from people who are very close to me, close friends. It was sort of like almost like being there. And I was primarily, I've always lived in the USA, in California, in one of two Ananda communities, either the Village or Ananda Palo Alto, where I've been for almost 36 years now. I have visited Swamiji often in India and often in Assisi, Italy, where Ananda also has community. But I was least involved in the community development in Europe, partly because I don't speak any European languages, and also that's just the way it came out. And as I'll explain, in 1997, Swami spent 9 months of that year in Italy. So even though it seems probable that I visited him during that time, I wasn't really part of his life. And so therefore my accounts are less. And also he moved into his house and really concentrated. He had a quieter life during 1997 to slightly make up for some of the tumultuous years that had led up to it, because we were right in the middle of the litigation, and for some of the things that happened afterwards. So just commenting on the rhythm of Swami's life and what this evening will be. So now we'll start with the collection of photographs that I have for the opening, which are primarily of the US and a lot around Ananda Village. But we'll just give you a general idea, as we do, of what life was like with Ananda at that time. Okay. This first picture and the first 3 or 4 pictures here, in order to get to Ananda Village, for those of you who've ever come, you have to cross the Yuba River. Since 1996, a new bridge has been built, but this was the bridge that we had for decades there. And in this year, 1997, the river went into flood. You can see how high it is on the bridge, and it actually even flooded some of the lower areas of Nevada City, which was a big adventure for everyone there, and they're great photographs. So this is the South Fork of the Yuba River. Let's see the next picture. And you can see how close it came to taking that bridge out. Next picture. And this is one of the low places in Nevada City where the water just came right down the main street. Next picture. And again, another magnificent picture. Ananda in 1976, we had a huge forest fire that took down half our land and most of the houses in the community area. So we didn't actually have a flood in our own community, but when you live out in a rural area, you often get to experience nature and its magnificence more often. And that was and is a marvelous part of what Master wanted from us. Many of his chants and songs are all images of nature. And Swami said, I don't know if it's later in this book, he talked about attunement to nature being a natural characteristic of the American temperament. And Master expressed that, and the American Indian temperament, all of which are energies that need to come forward as we move on into Dwapara Yuga. So next picture. Now we're just into the world of Ananda, and during this period of time, we had a large number of boys built. Most of the babies for quite some time were little boys. And the smallest boy in that picture, with his pulling on his mouth, is Keshava Betts. And since he's one of our Ananda friends who has remained with us from childhood, I thought you would enjoy. The next picture is also Keshava, there with his bright little smile. And then the one after is Keshava again. Okay, moving on from this. This is Brian McSweeney, now known as Aryavan. He lives in India now and is one of the leaders of the Education for Life. Aryavan grew up in the Palo Alto community, and he was one of the founding children in our Education for Life school. So it's quite fitting that he should be making a life as a disciple, helping to spread that message. He fell out of a tree or fell off the rope swing, I think, in this picture. That's what happened to his arm. Next. This is one of our classes at Living Wisdom School in Ananda Village. Nirani has actually been the teacher. She's the one on the left holding her own son, Christian. Rani actually now has had the pleasure of teaching children in very low grades, first and second grades, and then the children of the children that she taught. So she's been a stalwart of that school for decades. Next picture. This is the farm giants, the Ananda farm. That was sort of what we called ourselves. The Ananda community was called Ananda Farm for a long time. The farm. So this is the local softball team coached by some of the men in the community. Next. This picture is Elena and David Kretzmann. Elena is the granddaughter of Durga and Vidura, and David Kretzmann is the child of Tim and Mary Kretzmann. They are in kindergarten here. And for many years now, as adults, they've been a romantic couple. So it's just very sweet. It hasn't happened that much in our community, but this was a very dear example of children meeting as children with a lifetime destiny together. Next picture. This was the wedding of Gyandev and Diksha. Gyandev hugging Devi there. Diksha is his wife, standing next to him in the dark hair with the pearls. Next picture. Their wedding was in the small chapel at Crystal Hermitage. Haridas is the best man. Jyotish and Devi carried out the wedding. Next picture. Together, Gyandev and Diksha have been two of the foremost teachers of Ananda through the yoga teacher training program, and in the last few years through an extraordinary series of online classes that they've been giving. It's been a fruitful and very, very beautiful partnership between the two of them. Next picture. There they are, then the way they look now, and you're more likely to have seen them. Next picture. 4th of July, Ananda Village. For a period of time, we were able to bring that, the fire truck out, and the children got to play in the hose and the water. I think it was the local fire truck that would just come out to give everyone a lot of fun with the water during the 4th of July. Next picture is Ben Skillman posted some kind of a float that was created for that event. Next picture. The children building a pyramid, just enjoying community life. Next picture. This is 4 men acting out a skit, and it might be a Garrison Keillor skit. I'm not sure where it comes from. It's called House Husbands. And periodically the script resurrects itself, and it's extremely funny. And all these men applying their masculine mechanical skills to the question of keeping house with souped up vacuum cleaners and all sorts of things. It's really quite hilarious. Tim, Michael, Hunter, and Vajra. Next picture. This was 4th of July, I think, or Rajasi Day. Same foursome, 5-some now. Dive has joined the ranks. We just enjoy entertaining ourselves. I put these things up here because this is really the spirit of Ananda. Rather than spending money or relying on others, we just draw the natural talent and sense of fun out of each other and put out the energy to create good times for one another. This is how traditional societies have always worked. You had the storytellers and the dancers and the singers, and you would have community events and just generate out of your friendship everything that you needed. Next picture. This is a Shiva Ratri for the families held at the Crystal Hermitage. I always think, speaking of entertaining ourselves, that if times get really hard financially, which it looks like we're heading in that direction, we'll be thrown back on our own resources more. And I think we're all going to find that it's far more fulfilling and gratifying than the way we've been living more recently, where we just depend on money and manufactured entertainment rather than our own sense of creativity and devotion and celebration. Next picture. These are just a series of pictures of the children involved in the Shivaratri with people in costume blessing. Next picture. Another, I'm not sure exactly who we have here. It must have been a skit for the Shivaratri. Next. And here is Mantra Devi telling a story related to the event. Next picture. And Michael Gornick and Dharmadas chanting. Both are magnificent chanters. And when the two of them would get together, it would be heaven on earth. Still is, either individually or together. Next picture. This is Panduranga, who's one of the stalwart guitarists. He was a musician long before he came to us and brought great musical skill on many levels. He's made many recordings of his guitar playing using Master's melodies, which you can find online. Next picture. Roma at her birthday celebration. Just her face is so lovely in this picture. You can just sort of see a lifetime of devotion. Just in the serenity that you see there, she makes her wish. Next picture. Hashi standing in the community mailroom. Next picture. Jeannie and Hridaya. Hridaya just recently retired after more than 20 years as being the director of the Ananda Living Wisdom Schools at the village. Jeannie's been central to the music from the very beginning. Next picture. This is Maya Devi, who actually is a German lady who's lived in our Italian community since the beginning, since the early 80s. She and her husband, Helmut. She's the coordinator of the Kriya program in Europe. Next picture. This was a birthday party for Daya. I believe it was a birthday party for, I think, some of the Cancer birthdays, which is Leela in the flowered dress, Daya in the center with little Elena, who we saw with her now beau, David Kretzmann in the other picture. Next. And now Daya and Durga with Diana and Latika on either side. This is at Swamiji's house. This is the birthday party in the backyard of the Crystal Hermitage. Next. You can see birthday cakes being provided. There were about 7 or 8 of us who all had our birthdays in the same week. And over the years at different times, sometimes we'd all be in the same place, but there would always be at least a few. Daya leads the center in Delhi now. Durga just retired from running the meditation retreat from the last few years. Next picture. Still the birthday party. Everybody just enjoying each other's company. Next. And this is said to be the same birthday party, but it seems hard to imagine that it was. Devarshi, Krishnadas, Vidura, and Bharat. And this is the pool at Crystal Hermitage. Next. This is Gyandev again, and he's in Assisi now because he was one of the founders of the Yoga Alliance in the USA, which I think became a world model, and the leader of our yoga teacher, developer and leader of our yoga teacher training. He went to Italy to help them establish their program and to work with them and just to share. Next picture. This is this rather dim picture. It's appropriately dim. Kabir, when he was living in Italy, he now lives actually he's back living in Italy. He developed an enterprise which is making candles. I think the business is still going. So this was the little candle factory he developed to help support himself and add to the community. So the entrepreneur spirit has always been fundamental to Ananda. Just people with talents or with inspiration, just figure out a way to be able to live in community, to generate income for themselves, and hopefully, if they're successful, for others as well, with, worthwhile dharmic businesses. Next picture. This is the Portland community staff. Usha, Pranaba, and Parvati were there at that time in charge. Hanuman and Mari are still there. Next picture. It's a picture of Carrie Ann, who and Usha. You can see that they're sisters in many lifetimes, although not bio sisters in this lifetime. And they were both living in Portland at this time. Next picture. This is Leela Devi with the guitar in her hand. She's an American who lived in Italy for many years, Last week, I talked about her being the founder of the Flower Essence Company. This is Stephen Sturgis in the center in the white shirt. And he had a meditation group in London for a long time. He's still there. And Leela Devi came to be part of that group just to visit, as I'm going to be doing, in the next few months. Next. This was a women's retreat at Ananda Village. And that must have been a glorious day. Devi, Paula, Indra Devi, Mantra Devi, Durga, Seva, just Anandi, Roma, Hridaya. I mean, this is a group of saints. And I'm sure it was quite a powerful and wonderful day to be together. Next picture. This is the Living Discipleship Program for the summer of 1997. And Haridas and Roma were the mom and pop of that. And you see Daya and Darmini and Dana, recognizable faces, Satchiki, people who have gone on to be significant leaders within Ananda all over the world. Next picture. This was the retreat staff, the Expanding Light retreat staff. Viraj and you see Gyandev, recognize a lot of faces there. Next picture. Sundance was one of the deliberately built cooperative living spaces in Ananda community. Mostly we've built either duplexes or single family homes, or maybe sort of multi-unit, like apartments under one roof. But Sundance was designed to be a cooperative living space. And it was very well designed for that purpose and has continued to serve well in that way. And this was some of, I think, the original builders and founders of that house. Next picture. This is just a goofy picture of, if you can see Jaya in the middle wearing a hat and a wig. This, at Lake Tahoe, they have a summer Shakespeare festival. And oftentimes groups from our community would go. It's relatively nearby. And so they're just goofing around with the musicians before the performance starts. Next picture. This is in apartment 108 where I lived for many years. This is around our big dinner table. And Swamiji must have been with us, even though he's not in this picture, because that group of people would be drawn together because Swamiji was traveling. You see Jyotish and Devi and Naidruva in the corner. Lots, again, of familiar faces. This is, I learned to cook for crowds in my first couple of years of being at Ananda Village, and it definitely served me. We could put 16 people around that dinner table, and we often did. Yes, next picture, yes. The person, Bhavani, who helps me, just held up a glass that she's drinking water out of, and the same glasses are right on that table. This is Swamiji, and he was with us at Ananda Village for his birthday. He was there, he arrived in time for his birthday, and he was there to the end of June. And he'd been in Assisi since 9 months. It'd been 9 months since he came. So this was his birthday, in association with his birthday celebration there. Next picture. And him also giving a program at the amphitheater. It wouldn't have been spiritual renewal because he wasn't there, if this picture is actually 1997, but it was probably his birthday satsang. Next picture. And this is in his house at Crystal Hermitage, the dining room here. And at the end of the table, if we take the next picture, we'll see it more close up. This is Uma and Nirmala, and their birthdays are very close to Swamiji's. His birthday is May 19th, and they're both, so they always celebrate their birthdays together. And then and you can see they all have birthday candles. So this, in the next picture, this is Swamiji, and this is the last picture in this series. As I'll explain in a few moments, one of the things that Swamiji did when he was living in his little Seva kutir in Assisi was he wrote music. And during the 96 and 97, he was writing music. And one of the pieces he wrote was Robert Burns, a Scottish poet, wrote a poem called John Anderson. And John Anderson is a poem from the point of view of his loving spouse, who has been his lifelong companion. And they've shared a lifetime together. And the poem was written from her point of view as they're now aged, and it's the last years of their life. And she's just celebrating this lifelong love affair that these people have had. And the first verses are, because you'll hear the song in a moment, the first verses are sort of with a slightly with this in the Scottish dialect, and then it's repeated in American English, the way we're used to speaking it. Swamiji had been writing a lot of music. It might have been the time when he was writing the recitatives for the oratorio, which was last year in 1996. And I know he'd been, or else it was 97, and he was had just been writing a great deal of music, and he was tired, and he lay down to go to sleep, and he thought about that poem, and suddenly this beautiful melody came to him to set that song to music. And he said, his first response was, I've been writing music for days now, and I'm tired, and I'm ready to go to sleep. I don't need to write another song. And he said he didn't know that someone else had already set that song to music, some other composer. He said if he had known, he might have continued to resist. But in any case, he found that the song, as he put it, simply would not let him go to sleep. And so he got up and he wrote down the melody. Now, the song celebrates lifelong friendship in the form of this husband and wife. But what it really celebrates is we start young, and we stay together, and we go through all the phases of life, and our lives will end and we'll still be together. And it's an exquisite poem, and it's an exquisite melody. And we're all so grateful Swami was willing to get out of bed to write it down. Swami himself, I couldn't find any recording of Swami singing this, although I know they exist. I mean, I've heard him sing it, but rarely. He actually couldn't sing it for a very long time, because as he said to all of us, this is a song about a particular couple and their particular life together. He said, but it's really a song about lifelong friendship and the life that all of us as disciples of Master have experienced. And especially, from this decade, the 90s, was such a tumultuous and challenging time for us because of all the litigation that we had to face, and the Bertolucci lawsuit, which I've talked about, which we're still in the middle of. And Swami just couldn't get through this song. He would try to sing it and he would just start crying, and he just couldn't get through it. So, and in fact, many of the singers couldn't get through it, but gradually over time we were able to, they, not I, but they were able, to find a way to be able to. So I don't have Swami's voice on this. So the voice that you'll hear is Karen Gamow, and Todd Billingsley is accompanying her on the guitar. So now let's listen to this wonderful poem and song, John Anderson.
John Anderson, my John, when we were first acquaint, your locks were like the raven, your bonny brows brent, but now your brow is bare, John, your locks are like the snow, but blessings on your frosty power. John Anderson, my Joe. John Anderson, my Joe. John, we climb the hill together, and many a country day, John, we've had within the nether. Now we maun totter down, John, and hand in hand we'll go, and sleep together at the foot. John Anderson, my John. John Anderson, my sweetheart, when first we two did meet, your locks were like the raven, your bonny brow was sleek, but now your brow is wrinkled, John, your locks are like the snow, but blessings on your frosty head, John Anderson, my own. John Anderson, my sweetheart, we climbed the hill together, and many a lively day, John, we've had with one another. Now we must totter down, John, and hand in hand we'll go, and sleep together at the foot. John Anderson, my sweet.
All of these songs, in so many ways, are so nostalgic for me. And I'll talk about it as we go. When Swamiji settled in his kutir, his house there in Assisi, he went into a creative period. And one of the first things he did is he went, when Swami was 18 years old and was a college student, and his college professor asked the students to write a paper on their criteria for greatness in art. I'm not quite sure what the class was, but that was the assignment. Swamiji, at that point, had what he knew to be a divine revelation. He hadn't yet met Master. He wasn't thinking in those words, but he had a revelation, in the manner of like Einstein having a revelation. He just saw something that was true. And what he saw was that, greatness in art, he said, it has to do with the consciousness, the elevated consciousness of the creator of that art. And that's the criteria. And he talked about the quality of light that emanates from great works of literature. And he talked about Homer's Iliad and the quality of light, and the Shakespeare's plays and the quality of light, and the lesser quality of light that came out of Chaucer's work. And at the time, Swamiji, because he himself was an aspiring writer and an aspiring poet, the revelation about art as a means of transferring states of consciousness caused him to reconsider everything that he was doing himself artistically and how he was going to go forward. And in a very real sense, it ultimately led him to become a disciple of Master, because he realized that unless he had a message that was sufficiently elevated, the art that he would create would never be on the level of greatness to which he aspired. He wanted to help people through art, but he realized he had to have something within himself to give. And those are, those are stories that he tells in the path. Well, at that time, he wrote an essay about, I think he might have called it meaning in the arts at the time. And he described his criteria, the quality of light, the consciousness of the author. And the professor gave him an F. He just flunked him. He thought it was completely invalid. And even though the professor totally rejected what Swamiji had written, Swamiji said he knew he was right. And from the time that he was 18 until 1997, Swamiji went back to that essay and rewrote it 7 times. And he wrote it when he was a college student. He wrote it after he'd been expelled from SRF when he was living with his parents in 1962. Neither of those was published. He wrote it in the very early years of Ananda, 71, 72, somewhere in there. Maybe it was a little bit later in the 70s. He called it again meaning in the arts. He wrote it as the artist as a channel, crystal clarity in the arts. And then I think he wrote it 3 times under the title of Art as a Hidden Message, a Guide to Self-Realization. And that I might have missed 1 or 2 in there, but it was the 7th iteration. And he never went back to it after that. He finally, and he himself said, the ideas he had were so subtle and the importance of them as far as Swami was concerned was so enormous that he just kept going back and going back until he finally felt that the entire subtlety of what he had to say was there. I've done a whole study course on that book, and it's an extraordinary book. The final title, Art as a Hidden Message, a Guide to Self-Realization. The hidden message is that what an artist produces, the hidden message is the vibration of consciousness that they themselves have achieved and therefore are expressing. The hidden message is the vibration of consciousness. The guide to self-realization is the understanding that creative self-expression is a fundamental, a fundamental aspect of the path to self-realization, which it's very interesting because it's also a Dwapara Yuga approach to spirituality, because the Kali Yuga approach to spirituality is that you would never express yourself. To be creative is antithetical to the goal of the spiritual path, which is to crush the ego. And so part of what the nature of Ananda was, and the presentation and the way that we lived, and all the pictures that you see with all this creative self-expression, is the tone for that was set by Swamiji, which is, instead of coming into the monastery and just shrinking ourselves down to nothing and obediently do whatever anybody tells us to do. And, classically, the classic monastic training and obedience is you're out there planting the garden and you're told to plant the plants upside down, which means they'll die and they won't grow. But because obedience is more important than any other quality, you just do it, even though it's against all common sense. And Swami just turned that completely the other way and says, we're all here to be manifestations, to be expressions of the divine, which is endlessly creative. But the quality of creativity that we're expressing is not ego-based. And Swamiji himself said in other contexts, as well as the book, that one of the fundamental messages he was here to bring was a new kind of creativity, in which, rather than sort of digging the creative product out of our own subconscious, we actually attune ourselves to a superconscious level in which what we're trying to create, as Swami put it, already exists, and we just merely become the instruments for it. Everything that Swami did artistically, writing, architecture, lectures, music, all of it was created in that way. You tune in, and through your attunement, you become connected to a certain vibration of consciousness. And the way Swamiji put it was, if he was designing a building, it would come as architecture. And in the little bit of painting he did, if he was painting, if he was taking photographs, if he was doing music, if he was writing a book, he would tune into a certain vibration of consciousness, And whatever form he was using, that vibration would translate into that form, meaning that it could translate into many forms, but it would translate into the form that he was trying to express. Swami, being multi-talented, express different vibrations in different forms, but others of us who have perhaps just one way of doing it, but it's still, we start with the attunement. And that's where it's a guide to self-realization, because the process of attuning ourselves and the process that we have to go through personally in order to attune ourselves to create art that is more, or that is not just an expression of our ego, but is actually an expression of a received inspiration. And it's revolutionary for an understanding of spirituality. It's revolutionary to realize that we can also transcend the ego, but in a way other than suppressing it. So all the pictures that I put up of even the little children, dressed in costumes and doing creative things, and the house husbands, and just all the different ways, Ananda has always been rife with creative, artistic energy, because all of Krishna's soldiers look like Krishna. And this is how Master presented himself. But you see, Yogananda was just the same. Master wrote books, Master wrote poetry, Master wrote songs. Not all avatars by any means are also creative artists, but Master was, and Swamiji was. And it's because this is a new model. So Swami writing this book, it is really one of the very important books that Swami's written. Well, they're all important. There's not one that isn't. But what Swami did in the 150 books he wrote was he went to different aspects of human life. And if self-realization is the basis of your life, the principles of self-realization are the foundation of your life, how would you then be an artist? Instead of just saying, well, now I'm a spiritual person, I won't be an artist. No, how would you be a self-realization artist? How would you be a self-realization businessman? How would you be a self-realization householder? How would you be a self-realization teacher of children? So all of it is the same reversal of what the Kali Yuga image of what it is to be a spiritual person versus the Dwapara Yuga image. This is like integrating spirituality into everyday life. The reason that the Kali Yuga model is so different is because in Kali Yuga, the fundamental vibration of the planet, of society, is so gross that in order to concentrate spiritually, you have to separate yourself from it completely. But in Dwapara Yuga, it's a time when the vibration of society as a whole begins to rise, which, even though we're having a polarization right now, there's this tremendous upward movement of consciousness in the whole planet. And there's also a reaction to it, but still it's coming with great force. And the traditional monastic life is actually losing energy not because people want to be less spiritual, but because they feel they can be more spiritual if they integrate themselves into society as a whole. And creative self-expression is one of those areas that is being renewed by the arrival of Dwapara Yuga. And this is also when I was talking about how within the Ananda community, especially at Ananda Village for many years, where we had access to very little except ourselves, it just was a wellspring of constant creative effort, which fostered our self-realization. Because art, a guide, being an artist, if we understand it properly, is the same as to be a devotee. So great wonderfulness from this. Swami also wrote an album he called Secrets of Love, which was an instrumental album. And one of the songs on there was called Love is a Magician. He didn't write any words for it. And this man named David Miller, who is a musician himself, and he wrote most of the arrangements for Swami's songs, the orchestral arrangements, or even the Secrets of Love. Swami wrote the melodies and then worked with David to make the arrangements, because it's a completely orchestral a piece, instrumental piece is what I mean. And David Miller has a very, very fun sense of humor. And one of the things that he likes to do is write humorous verse. And he thought the song Love is a Magician needed words. So he wrote words for it. And they were just deliberately terrible words. Not that the humorous poem wasn't a humorous poem, but I never saw the whole poem, but Swami said it had lines like, "You sawed my heart in half," like the magician sawing the model. And Swami said in self-defense, he had to write words. And Love is a Magician, which we will hear at the end of this segment today, sung by Swamiji, Swamiji said it was, if he'd written nothing else in his life, and in many ways, he thought it was his favorite. I'm not sure if I can actually say that, but it was certainly there. It's a magnificent piece. And so that also came out of this opportunity to move to Assisi, to have his own home, to be able to live very quietly, to separate himself from all the tumult that was going on in America with the litigation and so on. And so Swami went in April. We had two couples had gone to Australia. One of the men was Australian. He was an Australian citizen, and with an American wife. He'd lived in the USA for a long time, but had always wanted to try to take Ananda back to his home country. So these two couples went to Australia and were making an effort to establish an Ananda community there, an effort which never fully succeeded. One of the couples actually stayed in Australia and made their home there, and still are there. And they teach yoga and teach meditation, and they're disciples of Master. But the idea that we had to really establish Ananda in Australia just didn't come about. But in April of 1997, to support that effort, there was a major yoga conference. Swami was invited to be the keynote speaker. So he went from Italy to Australia and was there for the entire month of April. After that, he came to America to be in America for his birthday. So, and then when he came to America, he came with the ticket back to Assisi for the end of June. Now, that was Swami's activity during this time. Now, during this time that Swami is away, we are still engaged in this lawsuit, this reputation destroying lawsuit, which I will remind you, the Bertolucci lawsuit was in state court. The SRF litigation against us was in federal court. SRF had already lost every major issue. By 1994, they had lost every major issue. By 1992, virtually, they'd lost it all. And so all of their exclusive rights, their trademarks, their copyrights, their claim to ownership of Master's publicity rights, everything, they'd lost it all. We published the original autobiography. Swami published his commentary on the Rubaiyat. We had access to all of Master's original writings. It was a nightmare for them. Rights they didn't even know were in jeopardy when they filed the lawsuit, or they had sufficient hubris to think that they wouldn't be lost, were just all lost. And the only way that they might get those rights back, our lawyer told us, was by a concept called tarnishment. If SRF could prove that any association in the minds of the public between SRF and Ananda, for example, that we followed the same teachings, we had pictures of the same gurus, tarnished their reputation, then they might be able to get some of their exclusive rights back. Swami, this was in 1994. Swami just said, get ready for it. By the end of 94, this woman had filed this lawsuit, and I talked about it in previous episodes, but we're right in the middle of it. So now we're up to 1997. In 1998, we finally had a trial on this. So Swami's gone to Italy. We're handling this. Partly Swami just said, basically, it's up to you to defend me. I'm not going to stand there and defend myself. And he wasn't needed. And of course, we stayed in touch with him. Now, we saw that this one was going to go to trial. And to be a litigator, to take a case all the way to trial. Well, let me back up a little bit. So then in 1994, probably 1995, sure enough, as soon as the Bertolucci case was filed, and SRF brought it into federal court, charged tarnishment, and our lawyer said, you cannot both create a scandal and benefit from it, because we had hard evidence, which I shared with you in previous episodes, that SRF was entirely behind this lawsuit, which just by the end just came out completely. There was not even any pretense that it wasn't true. So after much squirming and much fight on our part, the judge ordered Diamante to sit for a deposition. But months and months went by, and no date that we proposed was ever convenient. So here we are, it's now 1997, and we still haven't been able to get this deposition to happen. So that's part of it. Now, also before that, what happened is, while we saw that this case was probably going to trial, and a litigator, a trial attorney, not all attorneys like to be trial attorneys. It's a different talent. And so Nydruva and John, who are wonderful attorneys, felt they had to hire a litigator. So they found a local lawyer, local meaning in the same district where we live, where the courthouse is. And I only call him T in this book because he did not serve us well. And I do not wish to spoil his reputation. It can be easily discovered, but I saw no need to cast aspersions on his name. He was a litigator. We met him. We did not have the warm rapport with him that we had with John. And it was clear that he would never be a friend. But he had a good reputation, and we thought he was a good choice. It turned out he wasn't, but we didn't know that at the time. So we've worked with him now for several months. We've given him tens of thousands of dollars. We've spent a lot of time bringing him up to speed. Litigation is very expensive. But Swami's never met this man. So Swami comes back in May. He comes down to our community, to our house, and he meets this attorney for the first time. This attorney is a criminal defense attorney, and he's accustomed, the morality of his position is that he helps people get a fair trial, but he mostly represented guilty people. He represented guilty criminals. Why we thought this was a good idea, we don't know, but we were naive. Guilty criminals, and gives them a fair trial. So he comes to our community. They go over to the apartment where Nydruva lives in our community. Just this attorney, T, Nydruva, John, and Swamiji. And this man starts strutting his stuff, and his stuff is, my criminal defendants may say they're innocent, but I know they're guilty, and I'm just going to bully them into doing the right thing. And when the meeting was over and T had left, Swami came in and just said to us, this man is the wrong attorney for us. He doesn't respect me. He doesn't believe me. He will never tune into who we are. He will never have any idea of how to defend us. And Swami was just emphatic. And to just make it even more vivid, by this time, somehow or another, we'd met, and this was mostly in relation to the SRF suit, where we also thought we might need a litigator. We'd met this attorney named Rob Christopher, who was wonderful. And he was a litigator, and he was a very successful litigator, and he was a wonderful man. And as it happened, we worked with him for quite a number of years, and he became a good friend. He was just everything we wanted. And one of us called up Rob. He'd had a big trial schedule that had settled on the eve of trial. He was free. He could take our case. So all of a sudden, here we are. Swami says, fire this attorney that you have, but we've invested an enormous amount of money, like $50,000, and there was also money on retainer that we couldn't get back. John had to tell us honestly that sometimes the judge won't let you fire your attorney. I don't understand what that was about, but that's what he said. If we tried to fire him and didn't succeed, the whole situation would get worse. The end of it was we didn't listen to Swami. We just didn't listen. Now, the irony of this is one of the accusations about Swami was that he was this ruthless dictator who always got his way. And here, in one of the most important situations that we'd ever been faced with, he was as clear as a bell about what we should do. And when we decided not to do it, he just went silent. And as he said, he just inwardly prayed, Divine Mother, if this is what you want, I accept it with gratitude. And as things unfolded, he was every bit the catastrophe that we expected him to be. And later, the trial actually is next year, 1998, in the story of the book. But when I was in the courtroom and heard his arguments, I didn't even believe him. I mean, I could hear him and I could immediately take apart what he was trying to say because of exactly what Swami said. He could not tune into us, and therefore he didn't listen to us. So that's what's coming. But that day was a remarkable day in Ananda history. And it was a remarkable day also because it was a magnificent example of who Swamiji really was, which is he would try to inspire us. He would try to guide us. He would try to educate us, but he would never impose his will on us, ever, under no circumstances. And even then, he gave us every reason. We had every opportunity in front of us. When he saw that we weren't going to rise to the occasion, he said, well, Divine Mother, if this is what you want. Remarkable. So it was destiny. You have to just look, it was the karma of the situation. Now, I want to go back to another, some very interesting litigation related things happened in 1997, and this was also one of them. As I was saying earlier, in federal court, we won after great effort. We won an order that Dayamata had to sit for a deposition, but she just, held it by, oh, gee, that month won't work for me, or, oh, no, my attorney can't do it now. So we were just being stalled. So we went back to court, and Judge Garcia said, you must sit for that deposition or you will be in contempt of court. So there we are. So now she's going to have to sit for this deposition. And we have so much evidence. We know what's going to be revealed, which is that SRF has funded and put this woman up to this job to try to destroy Ananda, and it's not going to be pretty. And there was no pleasure for Swamiji in thinking of backing Dayamata into a corner and having to admit all of this, which, as you'll see when we get much later in the story, everything that we suspected was confirmed. Not necessarily right in this moment, but within a few years after this, everything was confirmed. There wasn't one suspicion, one thought that Swami had or we had that didn't turn out to be true. I mean, about the nefariousness of what they were doing. In their own minds, it was completely justified because they felt that Master's work was at stake. They are sincere devotees, they are great souls, and in their own minds, it was justified. I believe it was misguided, but it was not insincere. That's the best you can say. So here we are in this situation. And Swami writes to Dayamata, he wants to spare Master's work the shame of all of this. So he says, please, let's meet together. Let's solve this problem as devotees, as guru bhais. Let's just leave the lawyers off and just get together and try to solve it. And to our surprise, we get an immediate response. And SRF says, come to Pasadena and we'll all have a meeting together. So, okay, we'll come to Pasadena. Pasadena is their home turf. And so they make arrangements. They make hotel reservations for us. They make arrangements to have the meeting in this particular hotel. They tell us, when you arrive, we'll pick you up at the airport. So we have been as cold as ice with each other. I mean, we've been cordial, but there's been there's been a lot of tough encounters. We only see each other in court. We try to remain as cordial as possible. We try not to make it personal, but it's been some hard years here. So all of a sudden, they're going to pick us up at the airport. So it's like our legal team of 7 or 8 people. So we arrive at the airport, and the same monks and nuns that we've been meeting in court all this time greet us at the gate, pick up our luggage, put our stuff into a van. We drive to the hotel. We chat. Well, gosh, we chat like we're disciples of the same master. We chat like we're friends. And we establish ourselves in the hotel. The next morning we have this meeting, and it's just a love fest, just, from start to finish. And Dayamata starts it by saying to Swami with great passion, no more lawsuits. And so we just start having this exceedingly cordial meeting. There's nothing to discuss because we've all agreed that it's over. And somewhere in the midst of all this good feeling, Daya says, well, since, of course, we're all friends now, there's no need for you to take my deposition, is there? And Swami says, no, I guess not. She also wants him to withdraw the book, A Place Called Ananda, which is the story of his separation from SRF, but he says, I'll think about it. But because we're engaged in litigation, you can't just shake hands and call it quits. You have to go into court, you have to get the lawyers involved, you have to settle certain issues, you have to drop claims, there's a whole lot involved. So after this remarkable week, this remarkable meeting, in which then Swami goes into another room with Dayamata and Nandamoy and other of his old friends, and our little group is left with our counterparts in SRF, and we have a book of pictures of Ananda, and we all sit together and look at the pictures, and we talk about counseling people for Kriya. We just behave like we should behave. It was perfectly normal. Daya says to Swami in their private meeting, she says that Master appeared to her in a vision and told her to settle the lawsuits. That's pretty powerful, and it seems to account for the change. However, in order to really close it off, we need to get the lawyers involved. So all of a sudden, Dayamata and Swamiji are not involved, but the rest of us are in these sessions where we're trying to close it down. And all of a sudden, SRF just basically, step by step, asks for us to cede back to them everything that they'd lost. They're behaving as if they won the lawsuit, and because they won, now, it's just all going to close down and they're going to have all their rights back. And we said, really? And we gave as much as we could give. We gave away things we didn't want to give. No matter how much we gave, they kept asking for more. But these things take time. And so by the time it was clear that there was no possibility that we could ever settle on any terms that were honorable, there was a certain window of opportunity to take Dayamata's deposition, and we missed it. It closed. And we had to ask ourselves, have we just been, has this been a sham from the start? Was this just entirely, a deliberate effort, which proved successful, to avoid having her deposition taken? So because, of course, we never got her deposition, a great deal of what we asserted we were never able to confirm it from that side. But I'm not going to spoil the suspense. But later on, as I said, we had total confirmation, even of our suspicion, that it had been a deliberate ploy from the start. So what SRF decided, however, was, and there were a few remaining claims, but they were minor compared to what they'd already lost. They knew that they were never going to win anything with Judge Garcia, and they wanted to appeal to a higher court, just get out from under Judge Garcia and get to another judge who they imagined would think differently so that they could win an appeal. And so they decided to drop all the remaining claims, because you can't appeal any part of it until it's all finished. So they dropped all the remaining claims, put their attention on filing appeals. We did not expect any of their appeals to succeed. As it turned out, one did, because Judge Garcia was so good and so careful. In the end, he was reversed. And this is 1997, I'm talking about. In 2001, because these things take forever, one part of the case was remanded back to Judge Garcia, completely erroneously as far as he was concerned. But in 1997, the SRF case simply shut down. We had to answer the appeals, but compared to what we'd been doing, it was nothing. And so this is 97, and by 98, we're in court with the trial for the Bertolucci lawsuit. So one goes down and one goes up. And there we were. At the during that year also, and this was back in May, Swamiji came down to Palo Alto. This was the same meeting where he met, the same time where he met the attorney T. I believe it was the same time. And we put on a performance of the oratorio because Swamiji had never heard it since he had written the recitatives. He'd added all the small solos to carry it along. He'd written that at the end of 96. He'd faxed the songs over, as I talked about when I was talking about that year. We had put on a performance, but Swami'd never seen a performance yet, just because circumstances. So we gathered a choir from not only our community, but from everybody who wanted to come from many places, a huge choir. And because we now have this big temple, we could put on a big concert right on our own dais, right in our own sanctuary. And it was the first time that Swamiji could hear all of this. So it was an extraordinarily uplifted and festive occasion. And the first half of it, we played some of his not new instrumental music, some of his instrumental music, mostly songs from something called the Egyptian Suite, which was music Swami had written back in the 1981 when he went with Parameshwar on a pilgrimage to Egypt. These beautiful melodies that he felt were the expression of Egypt when it had been a high and noble civilization in a higher age, and then had gradually, as the age descended, the civilization also descended with it. But this was very light and beautiful music, and also was performed was John Anderson, and actually a friend of Derek Bell, an Irish woman singer, whose picture you'll see in a few moments. She sang John Anderson, and she had the right intonation in her voice and the right feeling for the poem. And it was really a beautiful performance. And then Swami himself sang Love is a Magician. Now, once again, we had all been through so much, and to be sitting with Swamiji performing this beautiful music in this wonderful church that Divine Mother had given to us, these extremely heartfelt songs, including the whole oratorio. This was the 12 years of litigation, extraordinary moments of inspiration, followed by, alternating with these periods of extremely tough energy, including that whole day with Swami trying to get us to change attorneys and all of the thing we had to go through with SRF and Diamata. And just like it was, I remember in the midst of that decade, I said to someone, it's really good that I've had other experiences with Ananda besides just this one, because if this was the only life I'd known, it would, I would be a very different person. But I'd had so many decades of just pure happiness that when, persecution comes, it's the making of you. And it really was. It was wonderful that it happened. It was just strenuous to go through. So now let's look at some of the pictures, and then we'll listen to Swamiji singing Love is a Magician. This again, random assortment. Just somehow this picture is so sweet to me with Jyotish and Devi in the front. This was Palm Sunday, and what was happening and what they're all looking at. You've seen other pictures of when they act out Jesus coming into Jerusalem as he did on Palm Sunday, perhaps riding on a donkey. So they're looking across the meadow and watching this procession come, just waiting for Jesus to come into the temple, as Jesus did come into the temple on Palm Sunday. Next picture. This was a Rajasi day. People have been working all day. And just the sort of, you can just feel the camaraderie of all these men drinking coffee, eating cookies, and enjoying their work together. Next picture. This is Vasanta and Bhakti Marg, and one of the jobs that happens in Rajasi Day is somebody walks around distributing cookies, and that was Bhakti Marg's assignment. Next picture. They were painting this wall. I'm not sure it still stands, but there was a design that somebody created. Oh yes, a design of all of these figures holding hands. I'm not sure if they actually traced people and then people filled it in with color. Next picture. This is Lakshman doing some kind of moving of rocks, apparently. Next picture. And outside on the market green, there's always an opening circle and a closing circle or lunch. So these are just the group gathered there. Next picture. This is one of the children's productions. Theater has always been an integral part of all of our schools. So this is in Palo Alto, we put the entire school, K through 8, in one huge 2-act play, a giant production. At Ananda Village, they tend to break it apart more by grades and have sort of an evening entertainment where each grade does a performance or a couple of grades. Next picture. It's just a series of children learning creative self-expression. Next picture. There we are. And Maggie has always had this marvelous costume shop, and so we always excel with the costumes. Next picture. And for a number of years, there was a wonderful choreographer who really created a lot of dance for the children. Some of these children she trained for 10 years. So dance was very vibrant during that time. Next picture. And Bajrang bought this little bus, and it was the school bus, and he would drive through the community and pick the children up so their parents didn't have to take them to school. And he just loved to be able to see them at the beginning and the end of the day. Next picture. This was a family service held at what they call the teaching temple now at the Expanding Light. And you can see the family services would be more interactive and more creative ways to help the children feel really involved. Next picture. This was an adaptation of Swami's short story, The Singer and the Nightingale, in which the singer, who's the man, that's Jeff Rice in the white jacket, he's a great singer, but something happens to his voice. And so a nightingale teaches him to sing again. And so these are crows, or maybe they're other birds. Maybe they're the nightingales, but the queen of the nightingales teaches him to sing again. Next picture. I think this might have been performed for Swami's birthday this year. And this is the whole cast in costume. And Devaki there in the beige holding flowers was the director of the performance. It was put on for Swami. And the previous scene is at Crystal Hermitage. Next picture. We're just skipping around. This is in 1997. We took a group to India again. And this is our pilgrimage group in India, one of the shrines there. We must have been in Rishikesh because I see Kavita. Anyway, that's where we were. Next picture. This is Asha, somewhere in India. Next picture. This is the dining room of the cluster of little houses at Ayodhya. They built individual units with their own kitchens, but they had to have a community room and a community kitchen. And Jyotish and Devi didn't live there, but they must have been invited up for dinner that evening. Next picture. This is a kirtan, probably for a Shiva Ratri, Nirmala Biraj in the front, David Hogendijk in the back. Next picture. This is just a beautiful picture of the spring garden at Crystal Hermitage, and where that balustrade is, that makes a stage for theater productions. It's a absolutely glorious setting for all kinds of music and theater. Next picture. And this is the glorious tree in the springtime. Maria Warner standing in front of it. Next picture. This is just a group of friends, Dharmadas and Nirmala, Agni and Daya, Devarshi and his wife Maria, and David Miller in the plaid shirt with Mantra Devi in the middle there. David Miller is the gentleman I told you who writes still all the arrangements for Swami's music. He's just brilliantly in tune with what it needs to be. We all owe him an enormous debt of gratitude. Next picture. I think that these three women all have their birthdays in the same week. So this was a July Cancer birthday celebration, Maria, Durga, and Leela. Next picture. This is Daya and Diana, and this would have been the Indian banquet at Spiritual Renewal Week that year. And we would often dress up in Indian clothes. Normally we don't wear saris, so it's a special occasion. Both of these ladies now have lived in India for the last 20 years, interestingly. Diana and actually they both live in Delhi. Daya and Diana both. Diana is an overall leader for India, and Daya leads with her husband, leads the Delhi Center. Next. Beautiful picture of Durga and Vidura. Next. And Panduranga and his wife Gitabai. Ananda has some really extraordinary, long, beautiful marriages between two devotees. Next picture. Latika, Hashi, and Sitabai for some occasion. Looks again like a birthday of some sort. Next picture, and that's Asha, probably at Spiritual Renewal Week or Swami's birthday, I'm not sure. Next picture. And again, David Miller with Nirmala and Dharmadas. Nirmala and Dharmadas are so central to the music. And of course, David Miller was too, so they often all work together. Next. Just a group of guys enjoying Christmas. The friendships again. Swami said one of the purposes of Ananda is to show the world what true spiritual friendship looks like. It's a very interesting thing that he said. And when I look at these pictures and I know all these people, and I know the years of experience that is represented here, and the attunement over a long period of time, I really understand what he means. That's why the song John Anderson is so touching. So many of us came young, and even by this point, it's already been 20 years, and we're getting older. We came young and we're still there. Next picture. Jyotish and Devi giving service outside in the summer of 1997. Again, talk about inspiring, deep, lifelong marriages. Of course, they stand as a shining light to all of us. Next picture. And just the blessing at the end of the service or in the middle of the festival, it seems. Next picture. This is the same service when, I think it's the same service. No, it might be different people. But Maitri wrote a song called Keep Calling Him, using words of Master. And it's one of the songs written by another composer, which is her, that is central to our anthology of music. So she's there with Nalini and Carlton singing it. Next. This is the legal team as it happens. The occasion, I'm not sure, but somewhere in the course of this, during the time Swami was there, we must have given some report, or for some reason came to the front. So this is the group with the, Keshava Taylor's there too, it's Vidura, Latika, Durga, Asha, David, Devi, Jyotish, Keshava, and Naidruva. This was the Ananda crew, and this for 12 years. This was the group that just took it through, plus our other attorneys, John, Rob, Christopher, and for a period of time, T. Next picture. Same group Durga saying something that's apparently making us laugh. I don't remember why, but there was a large crowd in the amphitheater because Swami was there. So it was a big event that we were addressing. Next picture. This is Naidruva also talking, presenting clearly something that was important that needed to be shared. Next picture. This is the Irish singer that I spoke about, and she stayed with Mantra Devi and they became very good friends. I can't say her name. It's an Irish name that's Mayrid. I can't really remember how it was pronounced. She was a beautiful lady, beautiful singer. She really brought her heart to that song. Next picture. And this is the oratorio that I referred to. This is our temple. We've since remodeled it somewhat, so it looks a little different now, but this was 97. We bought it at the end of 94, so we hadn't yet done that. And this is Agni directing, and that's the whole choir there. It's a very, very big group. Swami sang, I don't know whether Swami sang in this performance. He's not standing there now. So let's show the next. And this is the performance itself. It appears to be this is the performance, not afterwards. So it seemingly Swami did sing. And there we all are. My. Next. And this is Swamiji after the performance, receiving the applause and being gifted with a bouquet of flowers. And the next picture. Swami just obviously extending his arms in appreciation to the audience. And this, we skipped, go ahead. We have another picture. They're a little out of order. This is out of order. Swamiji, oh no, maybe it isn't. I put it in order. So what is the order? This is us simply walking down the same occasion in which the legal team was standing in front of the group. This was when Swamiji, it must have been his birthday in May, just coming down the hill to the amphitheater. Next picture. And Swamiji speaking probably on that occasion. And next picture. And this is a completely different occasion, but the same year. Oh no, this would be his birthday. This would be a birthday gift for him probably. Next picture. You see how relaxed Swamiji was? He was just so at ease. There was never any like, lo, I am the great leader. I sit on a throne and I never. He's just sitting on a chair with his leg crossed, just as relaxed as he can be. Next picture. This is Swamiji and I think in Rome. And it was this year or approximately that year. You know, I often would travel to where he was and just spend time with him. It was essential to my well-being. Next picture. This is Swamiji at his birthday celebration in the backyard, in the back garden of Crystal Hermitage, just coming out, talking to people. Next picture. Now we're skipping around. We're back to the amphitheater. Swami was addressing the group. Next. Satsang at his dome. And everyone is wearing a name tag. So these must have been guests either from a group from another center or the guests at the retreat at that time. More likely it was a group from another center. Next picture. Now we're back to his birthday. Why I put them in this order, nobody knows, but this is what I did. Now we're back to his birthday. And obviously people are blessing him. Next picture. Now we're back at the amphitheater. Swami praying at the beginning. And here he is, and this is a close-up of the picture we saw before of the oratorio at the end of the oratorio performance. And this is what we call the chapter, what I call the chapter photo for 1997, because that oratorio performance in some way really defined that year, despite everything else that happened. Having Swami hear that and be with us, that's what we'll remember. All the ups and downs of Maya just come and go. Swamiji himself said, when liberation comes, we look back on all our incarnations and we realize that the only enduring reality is when we touched into the divine spirit, and everything else was just light and shadow. But those moments of divine contact remain with us forever. And so when I'm talking about this whole decade in 1997, there was so much that happened that was just light and that was just shadow playing against light. But this oratorio performance and the radiance of Swami and the glory of the music, that's imprinted on our souls forever. So now let us listen to Swamiji himself singing, Love is a Magician.
Love is all I know, sun rays on the snow of our winter long, in darkness without song. Oh, my heart's a fire, burning all desire. Only you remain, and life again. Too long I did stray, flung lifetimes away, imagined you did not care. I know now your smile was mine all the while. I listened and love was there. I can't breathe for love, all the stars above call to me, come home. Life's waves all end in foam, only love can heal all the pain I feel. What a fool was I to turn away. Love is all I know, sun rays on the snow of a winter long, in darkness without song. Oh, my heart's a fire, burning all desire. Only you remain, and life again. Too long I did stray, flung lifetimes away, imagined you did not care. I know now your smile was mine all the while. I listened and love was there. I can't breathe for love, all the stars above call to me, come home. Life's waves all end in foam, only love can heal all the pain I feel. What a fool was I to turn away.